Now, in the title of my talk, I had this term 21st century learning environment. So the one that you saw in the first speaker, it was like a classroom, but it was transformed, where students are not seated in rows, but they are working and they are walking all around. So I want to share with you the context of 21st century learning environments, taking examples from my own class. So for this semester, I'm teaching one undergraduate course, which is Educational Technology for Bachelor of Physical Education students. So these Bachelor of Education students are very active. They are not technology-based students. They do physical education. They become teachers in schools, teaching physical education. This was a class that I did just last Tuesday before coming here, right? So when we talk about 21st century learning environments, our first notion of 21st century learning environments is that there's lots of technology. And just now we heard that there was a question, what happens when there is no technology? What happens when the teacher doesn't use technology? So in this classroom, the particular topic or the particular skills that I wanted to teach was to introduce students to the use of AR, augmented reality. Very simple apps that they can just download from the internet into the mobile phones here. And you can see that my students are all very engaged in the process, the teaching and learning process. You can see the QR codes on the screen. This is another example also of AR where they just use their mobile phone. All students, I think, including those in here. This is universities, yeah? So mobile phones is very common. And we use these mobile phones because I know my students, they cannot live without their mobile phones. So how do we engage our students when they are attached to the mobile phone? Even if you say you can't use your mobile phone, you will see they are still using the mobile phone, right? So using the mobile phone, leveraging on the mobile phone for teaching. So this is an example of how the students were moving around the lab, looking at this Winnie the Pooh, right? So this is a very basic AR kind of technology that I was trying to introduce to my students. And remember, these are physical education students where they don't really have technology skills in them, yeah? They are not from the program of technology. Now, just now when we mentioned 21st century learning environments, I mentioned, and Shikit also mentioned, that don't restrict ourselves to technology. So you see, this is the same classroom, but there is no technology, but the students are using some kind of cups. I was trying to teach them the TPEC, Technology, Pedagogy, and Content topic, where I used the cups and I made it into a game to engage them to learn more about what is TPEC. And the 3 cups, yeah, I got them to put in examples. When you say technology, what do you mean by technology? When you talk about pedagogy, what do you mean by pedagogy? When you talk about knowledge, what do you mean by knowledge? So this is one example of a technology class without technology. Yeah? This one is a debate without technology as well, but a different approach that was used in the classroom where 2 groups of students were debating the pros and cons of using technology. This is another situation where the students are presenting using posters. So at the end of the class, the end of the semester, after I've given them the assignment, they have to present in the form of posters. So it is to try to nurture their creativity, their communication skills, and so forth. This one is how they are learning with mobile phones. And this one had a big chunk of technology here where they learn to do 3D printing. So one of the assignments that I gave to my students here to be submitted at the end of the semester. So currently we are in the 5th semester. We have we are in the 5th week. We have 14 weeks. So currently it's underway. So at the end of the semester, my students have to create a board game by integrating the technology that they learn throughout the 14 weeks with me. So one of the example here is to create a 3D board game by integrating the AR that they learned that I showed you just now. So what I'm trying to say here is that 21st century learning environments is about technology, and it is also about, not about technology, but rather how you use the learning approach here to teach so that students learn meaningfully. The learning environment also doesn't mean or is confined to the space, that it has got to be equipped with all sorts of high-tech technology. And when we talk about 21st century learning environments, of course, then we ask, who are our learners? What are the attributes of our learners? And the things that comes into my mind, as well as your mind, of course, these are the very common attributes that we want to nurture in our students. Lifelong learners, those who are able to solve problems, good communicators, critical thinkers, those who are able to do good reflection, and those who are able to adapt. So adapt with the use of technology and adapt without the use of technology. And if you actually Google the term 21st century learning, I am very sure that you are going to see this as the first find or the thing that appears on your Google screen. This is the framework for the 21st century learning, which actually emphasizes on the skills that all students are expected to have or to acquire. And it cuts across all the subjects. So, for example, life and career skills, learning and innovation skills, information, media, and technology skills, and so forth. But the question now is, how do we actually make our students as creators of knowledge? This is what we actually want, so that they become lifelong learners, rather than information seekers. They create and learn at their own at the same time. Yeah? So the question that we have to ask ourselves as instructors, as well as educators, is how do we inspire and how do we challenge our learners to learn on their own volition. Yeah? So we know that it's very important to design your learning. So Chikit just now mentioned about how do you design your learning activities to make students interested and engaged in your learning. So that is one thing, that a skill that every educator needs to acquire or need to know before you can actually teach meaningfully in the class. But the problem now we all are facing here now is that, I believe it happens in almost all the countries, is the examination-driven culture, right? This is where students learn because of the grades. The grades will decide your future. Which university are you going to go? Which schools are you going to send your child to? It is all based or dependent on the examination grades, yeah? So when this culture actually exists, or it is being practiced in the education system, you find that there's learning fatigue, right, among the learners. They become very unhappy. The examination results become the sole deciding factor of their future, and they become less interested in learning. Now, these are some factors that was taken from a paper written by Professor Tak Wai Chan, yeah, and his colleagues, including Chikit and as well as myself. We were trying to highlight the problem that most Asian countries actually are facing in terms of the education system. So what happens is that there's no change in the learning environment, but we expect our learners to have these 21st century attributes. It's still examination driven, examination oriented, grade is the one that we need to go for. Yeah, this is how the students are being drilled from young until university, that it will decide your future. But nothing has changed. But what we expect is the outcome, which are the 21st century learner attributes. So there must be some change that needs to take place. We as educators, we need to do something about it. So we always hear that success in learning is all about having knowledge, being skilled, yeah? But there are actually plenty of literature that has shown that success in learning is actually very much dependent on the learner's affective characteristics. So that is the key word that I want to discuss with you today, or share with you, the affective part of you. So we know that knowledge is what is being emphasized in school, yeah? And the question that we have to throw to ourselves and answer, to seek answers for, how do we make our students learn on their own volition? How do we make our students want to learn? They come to class so excited. They can't wait to go to school. How then do we sustain learning? How do we make them continuously learn, yeah, and be happy in class? So that's a very big challenge that all of us face. In Malaysia, it's a big problem, right? And before I left for Malang, I had a class on Tuesday. So remember I said I was teaching a group of physical education students, yeah, who are not really knowledgeable in technology. So what I did was I asked them to draw me an infographics of how you feel from week 1 to week 5. So currently we are in week 5 of the semester. So I wanted to gauge how are they feeling, what do they think about my course, yeah? Because I know if I ask them face to face, they will probably say, just shake, no, yes, right? They don't communicate, they're shy. So I told them to take out a piece of paper, write or draw. So I told them, give me an infographic of how you feel about my course from week 1 to week 5. So this is what I got. First week, I felt a little confused, right? They don't know what is educational technology. They have no idea because of their background. However, our classmates and teacher are very warm-hearted. I feel very happy. And then I feel interested. So this is week 3. So as the class progresses, yeah, there seems to be some kind of positive change in their feelings towards my course. And you see that by week 5, right? So this particular student says, my English is not good, but I'll try my best to learn more. Right? So there's progression in terms of how my students' feelings towards my course. So I'm quite pleased because something from being very confused to something they say, okay, they are interested now in my course. This one shows, started off happy, right? Learned many things. This student even claims to have fallen in love with my subject. They like the technology and they are enjoying the class. This third student shows that he's feeling excited on week 1 and then week 2. Claims to be in love then, and they like it, enjoy it, and seems to be enjoying my class. I'm not too sure if this really is reflective of what they feel. But I told them to be honest. I said, write whatever that you feel. So if you see that there is progression in they didn't focus on the knowledge really, but they were actually focusing on something that they enjoy, like they say they are confused. So really, what is happening here is that the affective domain actually is very important in teaching. You know that there are 3 domains in learning, right? Cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. And all these years, yeah, I'm sure you heard of Benjamin Bloom, 1956. He came up with the Bloom's taxonomy. Every education student must know your Bloom's taxonomy. You have to memorize, right? You start it from remembering, and then the highest level is creating. So these are all focusing on knowledge. This was in 1956, the early 50s. So in the early 50s, yeah, the education was very much focused on knowledge. Nothing was said about affective. Psychomotor came later, yeah, but it was also seen as very important. But the affective part was always neglected and forgotten. How do you feel today? Before coming to Malang, I was very excited. I didn't know what to expect. Yeah. So the feeling comes first. And when this feeling is there, a positive feeling, it actually makes you act on something. So in the late 50s, yeah, and the early 60s, that was only when they realized that the affective domain is a very important aspect of education. So in UPM, in my university, our learning outcome has to include cognitive domain, psychomotor domain, as well as the affective domain. Because we know that these 3 domains actually makes a student holistic in terms of them being a successful learner. So basically, my talk, something that I want to discuss with you, share with you, is about the affective domain. When you do or you carry out a research or study, or when you are teaching in the classroom, do not forget about the affective part of your students, right? So there are 2 factors that I want to share with you, the 2 affective domains or components that I want to share with you is firstly attitudes, and secondly interests. These are very, very fundamental components of affective. They look very trivial, they don't look important, but rather, if you have a negative attitude, right, chances is that you are not going to do it. You don't like reading books. You are definitely not going to walk into a bookstore and pick up a book to read. You don't like eating apples, right? So I love eating apples. So yesterday when we went to the apple orchard, we all started plucking the Malang apples. So I'm very excited. I showed the picture to my daughter, and I said, I'm bringing back apples for you to try from Malang, right? Nobody can, you know, we can't find Malang apples in Malaysia, so it's going to be very, very exciting for my daughter, right? So that's attitude, positive attitude, feeling excited about something. The second one that I'm going to talk to you is about interests, yeah? And let's look at the affective domain. Now, affective domain, there are 3 criteria for it to be identified as an affective domain. Affective domain needs to have these 3 criteria. Number 1, intensity. The strength, I'm going to give you examples of it, yeah? Number 2, direction. Is it going to be positive or is it going to be negative attitude? And then the third one is target. Target is, what is that object that you have attitude about or your feelings about? So the next slide shows the characteristics, yeah, and also the meaning and criteria. So just now when I said about the affective domain, it has to have intensity. So it means that the degree and strength of feeling. How strong is your feeling? The extent of the feelings vary, right? So I give you an example of hate. Hate is a stronger emotion than dislike. You dislike this person, but you hate this person. So there's a degree. Which one is stronger? Of course, hate. For the direction, is it positive or negative orientation of the feelings? So it's either good or bad thing. Hate is a bad thing, right? It's not good. love is a good feeling. You feel really loved. Yeah? So love is the opposite of hate. So there is direction. And then the third one is the target. What is it that you hate? What is it that you love? What is it that you like? So the object. So for example, a person hates coffee. I love coffee, for example. So coffee is your target. A person loves coffee and tea. So there are two targets here. But there are also occasions when you feel anxious or you have a feeling but you don't know towards what. So for example, on Tuesday and Wednesday I took a flight to Surabaya. I felt a little bit anxious because I wasn't sure what is there in Malang, in Surabaya for me, feeling anxious. But I'm not too sure why I had that feeling. So this is the characters of affective domain. The one that I want to emphasize here is attitudes. So just now I said I was going to talk about attitudes and interests. The first one is attitudes. Now, past research, there are many research that has been done on attitudes, which shows that attitudes is an antecedent of behavior. And you know learning is a behavior. So you have to tune the students' attitudes towards what you want to teach in class. Make them like your course. Make them like technology, so that they would use technology. And they would learn using technology. And there's loads of literature, loads of past studies on attitudes. Attitudes towards computers, attitudes towards WhatsApp, attitudes towards laptops, all sorts of studies, but all about attitudes. So basically, what is attitudes? This is a definition of attitude: a mental and neural state of readiness, organized through experience, exerting a direction of or dynamic influence upon individuals' response to all objects and situations which it is related. So to put it in a very layman term, it could either be a favorable or unfavorable feelings towards an object. That's attitudes. So, quoting Chikit again, he said that we as educators, we need theory. Whatever that we do. So, practice without theory, theory without practice is dangerous. That's a quote that you can always find on the internet. So when you practice, you need a theory to guide you. When you develop a theory, you need to practice it and to see whether it is true. Is it, when you test it, is it valid, your theory? So the theory about attitude, there's lots of theories, but the one that I feel that has been really being very established is the one by this theory of reason action, the TRA. From the TRA, there were so many other theories that was actually, that emerged from the TRA. You have the technology acceptance model, then you have the UTALT model 1 and 2. So this is the fundamental of all, the theory of reason action. And according to this theory, attitudes has an influence on the intention, the behavioral intention. You intend to buy the apples, Malang apples. I intended to buy the Malang apples. So I had a positive feeling towards apples. I had this intention and I got physically the apples. So it actually influenced my behavior towards the apples. I got them, I'm going to bring them back to Malaysia. So the gist of this theory is that attitude influences or has a strong contribution to behavior. So when you talk about behavior, you relate this to the learning behavior, students' learning behavior. They want to learn. How do you make them have positive attitudes towards your class, towards the content that you want to teach? This is quite an old study that I did in 2009. We use the technology acceptance model. This is a spin-off of the theory of reason action. So you see, the attitudes towards computer use has a strong influence towards the users' behavioral intention to use technology. So this is tested. We tested this model. We found it to be valid. All right? So the study shows that attitude is a very important component of the affective domain. The affective education should not be neglected. So I'm showing here some examples, 2 examples of quite recent studies. So although attitude is an old component, yeah, an old construct, but it's evergreen. It has, been researched many, many times. Even in 2019, 2017, you can still find literature in relation to attitudes. So these 2 studies, one carried out in Botswana, it says that attitudes towards WhatsApp use for teaching and learning is significantly and positively related to intention to use WhatsApp for academic writing. The other study was done in China. It says that attitudes towards mobile social games positively influences behavioral intention to play mobile games. So this past literature or past studies has shown some strong evidence that attitude is a very important component of the affective domain. All right, so that was about attitude. The second construct, or the second component that I want to share with you is interest. So interest is, in Bahasa Melayu, is called minat. Is it called minat? Yeah. It's the same. So what is, apa minat? Apakah minat? Right, so what is your interest? And the studies have shown that interest has a strong influence on learning behavior. So let me actually define interest first. It's a disposition organized through experience which impels an individual to seek out particular objects, activities, understandings, skills or goals for attention or acquisition. There are many other definitions about interest, but I really like this one because it's very comprehensive and it's meaningful. So it means that through experience, it's a disposition organized through experience which makes an individual to do something. So this was by Getzels, 1966. Okay? So because of this particular construct, and also about the examination-driven culture in the education system, a group of Asian researchers, so you see Chikit is number 2 there, I'm also at one of these authors here, right? And this paper was actually led by Professor Tak Wai Chan from Taiwan. He was concerned about the learning environment in Asia because of the examination-driven culture. So this group of people then work together, right? So you can see that it comes from, the authors come from many countries, but the majority of the authors are from Taiwan, And according to this theory, the IDC theory, so all this while people were working on interest, but not really something that was actually driven by theory. So like I said just now, if you are working or researching or doing something without theory, it can be dangerous. So this group of researchers, we came up with this theory, which is called interest-driven creator theory. Now, according to this theory, the learning must be enjoyable and it must be made effective. Learning is productive and full of achievement. So that is creation, the blue circle. And then when you have this, the learning becomes productive, it is repeated, it becomes a routine. When you're doing something, it becomes habit. So I think every of us have a habit without us thinking. What is your habit? You like to eat something when you're actually, or you're munching something when you're watching TV, right? Your habit of the moment you sit down, you pick up your handphone, you start checking your message. Something that you don't actually think, but it's automated. It's a process that is in you. It becomes part of you, actually.
I'm sorry, Professor, the time is almost up.
Okay, I have to speed up. So, what I want to share with you here is that the theory, right, emphasizes on the design of the learning activities. When you design the learning activities, you have to spark the interest of the learners. And when they have interest in your class or the contents that you want to share, you develop the interest-driven creation activities. The activities has to be interesting to them for them to be able to create. And then when it's incorporated into their daily routine, it becomes their habits, becomes part of them, yeah? Repeated over time. So I just quickly go through with you. This is actually the interest loop, right? So I don't have much time to go individually, but to tell you that the interest group is made up of these three components: triggering, immersing, and extending. So once the students have interest in what you want to teach, then they are engaged in your activities. So your activities then is where the creation loop is. You give them activities, they create something. So when they create something and you allow them or you encourage them to display or share and present in the classroom, they get feedback from the audience or from their friends. And the new knowledge that they form, yeah, actually will then make them creators. And lastly, okay, this is the second one. So at the same time, the creation, you have to sustain the interest of the learners. So this is so important, yeah? So don't forget, when you start the interest, it has to be sustained throughout the learning process. And then the last one is called habit. So once it is in them, right, they become creators, then it is repeated over time. Many, many times, yeah, it becomes their habit. So the IDC theory, the interest-driven creator theory, yeah, is something that is new. It was first published in 2018, yeah, in the paper that I showed you just now. So basically, this is what I want to emphasize on. The design activities, you start with interest, they become creators, and then it becomes a routine for them where it becomes the habit. Okay, so I think I'll skip one slide and I'll end here. So I like to end my talk by Aristotle. Aristotle, he inspired me with this, and this is how actually I thought that I might want, this is why I decided to talk about the affective characteristic or the affective domain, yeah? So educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. So thank you very much.